The views and opinions expressed on America's Workforce Union podcast and its digital media channels are solely those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of the producers or sponsors.
Welcome to the America's Workforce Radio Podcast, the flagship production of the American Workers Radio and Podcast Network, where organized labor and its never-ending fight to protect the rights of the American worker come first. Now, presented by LIUNA, Laborers International Union of North America. Here's your host, Ed Flash Ferens.
AFGE and the TSA. What happened in court in the latest fight with the Trump administration? Meanwhile, workers in the city of San Francisco are reaffirmed the right to strike. And today on the show, we check in with the International Brotherhood of Teamsters in California and the National Labor Office of Blue Cross and Blue Shield. Welcome to the Friday, May 30th edition of America's Workforce, where we are available on at least 5 platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. Lindsay Dougherty will be our featured guest on the show today. Lindsay is a proud second-generation Teamster. She comes from Detroit, and now she's in North Hollywood. She began her career in the motion picture industry as a transportation dispatcher. That was about 2 decades ago. Well, for the last 10 years, Lindsay has fought on behalf of the rank-and-file Teamsters, part of Local 399, as a business agent, lead organizer, recording secretary, and now principal officer. She also serves on the Teamsters General Executive Board as Vice President at Large. She holds the position of Division Director for the Motion Picture and Theatrical Trade Division. And that division alone, now the Teamsters have about 1.3 million members, but that division has about 15,000 Teamsters that work in the film and television industry, all through the United States and Canada. And there's a lot of unions that work with the Teamsters. As Secretary-Treasurer of Local 399 and chair of the Hollywood Basic Crafts. This includes IBEW Local 40 electricians. You got LIUNA, our presenting sponsor, Labor's Local 724. You got the operative plasters and cement masons. This would be a Local 755. The plumbers, UA 78. You know, there's a lot that goes into Hollywood production. Additional roles held by Lindsay, including advocating for the collective strength and power of working people, and she serves as a vice president on the California Federation of Labor. I tell you, she's a busy, busy lady. We're going to talk about, well, who are the motion picture Teamsters? We'll get into that. I mentioned there's 15,000 of them. And right now she's trying to standardize the contracts. And the problem is the industry is shrinking right now. And a lot of this has to do with streaming. Most of it streaming. This started several years ago. Everybody likes those streaming shows. And here's the other issue, tax incentives. So many states are trying to lure production out of California. And cost is a factor. I get that. California is pricier than most states. That's been going on for decades now, and it's accelerating, and it's going outside the country. It's going to countries around the world who are giving more incentives. So essentially what we're seeing here is a race to the bottom. That's what it's all about. Jon Voight, the actor Jon Voight, is very vocal on this. In fact, he's been at the White House, and she's going to talk about that because we don't want to see these jobs disappear. And if things continue the way they are going, that's exactly what's going to happen. Later in the show, we're going to check in with Merrilee Logue, and she's got a guest joining us from Clinical Affairs. And, you know, this is Mental Health Awareness Month. We just have one day left in the month, and we've been doing many, many interviews here to talk about mental health. It's a crisis in America. We're talking 1 in 5 adults, more than 50 million people currently experiencing a mental health condition. Mental health encompasses emotional, psychological, social well-being. It affects how we think, how we feel, how we act, how we handle stress. And there's a whole lot of stress in today's world. Well, Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield is confronting this whole issue here. And we're going to get into what they do as far as the health plans, because it's a great insurance company, no doubt about that. So that'll be to button up the show later here on America's Workforce. Now, a brief look into the world of labor. This segment brought to you by Boyd Watterson Asset Management, offering fixed income, real estate, and equity investment options to clients from coast to coast. You can find more at BoydWatterson.com. Well, at a hearing weighing the American Federation of Government Employees, AFGE's request for a preliminary injunction against the TSA's termination of the collective bargaining agreement covering their employees, AFGE lawyer Abigail Carter argued in court that the pattern of antagonism against the union for its First Amendment activities demonstrates retaliatory intent and evidence of such a pattern supporting causation. We're getting into the legalese here a little bit. Now, according to AFGE, the Trump administration's reasons for eliminating TSA workers' collective bargaining rights are pretexts for retaliation against unions that have challenged the administration and amount to a violation of the union's First Amendment rights. Pretty simple, right? While TSA is exempted from Title V of the U.S. Code, lawyers for the government argued that Judge Marcia Peckman of the District Court for the Western District of Washington lacked jurisdiction because the union had not first challenged the agency action under the Federal Labor Relations Authority, which governs federal agencies covered by Title V. You knew this was not going to be easy. There's going to be a seesaw battle going on here. But every day is a win for workers. Keep that in mind. Let's go to California, where a court of appeals reaffirmed San Francisco city workers' right to strike. Now, if we go back to 2023, the International Federation of Professional Technical Engineers, Local 21, and SEIU Local 1021 challenged two provisions in the city's charter that prohibited city workers from striking and mandated the termination of striking workers. Well, the unions alleged that the provision conflicted with the Myers-Milius-Brown Act. After an administrative law judge ruled in favor of the unions, well, the city appealed. Now, the Court of Appeal denied the city's request for relief. President of SEIU 1021, Teresa Rutherford, stated, once again, justice has prevailed on this issue, and now the courts, as well as the state, have officially recognized that the city and the county of San Francisco cannot prohibit strikes or retaliate against workers who participate in them. And from the category, makeup of courts matter. It's so important to know who the judges are. And in cases of federal courts, these judges are appointed, okay? The Fifth Circuit Court is not what you call worker-friendly. They rejected a petition to enforce a 12-year-old back pay order, which was issued by the National Labor Relations Board against All Service Plumbing and Maintenance. This is a company based in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. This was a 2-1 decision. The Fifth Circuit ruled that they would not require the company to pay $100,000 to 3 workers it fired during a 2009 union organizing campaign. Why? Because the board failed to prove that enforcement of this order would be equitable. Specifically, the court stated it would be unfair to enforce a delayed order that was accruing interest when the delay was caused by administrative oversight. Doesn't it sound like they went out of their way to screw workers who've been fighting this for what? 16 years? 2009? Holy smoke. Amazing. Amazing. 2-1 decision. And we're talking $100,000 to 3 workers. Do the math on that. That's a lot of money. All right, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to go to California and check with the Teamsters and see what they're doing to protect jobs in the motion picture and television industry. Back in a few minutes, you're listening to America's Workforce.
This is America's Workforce.
It takes LiUNA to build North America's infrastructure. From roads and bridges to schools and skyscrapers, the men and women of LiUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, build the projects we depend on. From constructing the Freedom Tower on the site of the former World Trade Center to untangling Washington, D.C.'s congested interstate, LiUNA members do the work that matters. Find out what it takes to be built by LiUNA at liuna.org. That's liuna.org.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Heat and Frost Insulators Labor Management Cooperative Trust. Find out more at insulators.org/LMCT.
There is unity and strength for workers.
We are the USW.
We are the USW.
The United Steelworkers.
The largest industrial union in North America.
We represent 850,000 members in the U.S., Canada, and the Caribbean.
We work in metals,
rubber,
chemicals,
paper,
oil refining,
atomic energy, and the service sector.
We are steelworkers, standing strong and fighting for what's right.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Ironworkers. You can find more at ironworkers.org.
America's Workforce is sponsored in part by Boyd Watterson Asset Management, LLC. Find out more about our investment solutions tailored to meet the needs of Taft-Hartley funds at boydwatterson.com.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers. You can find more at ifpte.org.
American workers are sick of struggling to get by. It's time to get ahead. In the Teamsters Union, workers are winning industry-leading contracts, historically high wages, fully paid health care, and retirement benefits you can count on. Across the country, Teamsters fight alongside our brothers and sisters to secure a better life. It's what we've been doing and how we've been living for more than a century. When we fight, we win. Join us. Be a Teamster.
This is America's Workforce. More shows available at awfradio.com.
And don't forget, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast, AWF Union Podcast. Before we join our featured guests, I got to mention, thank you for listening to America's Workforce for the second year in a row. We are the #1 union podcast in America. And I always say it's because of the great guests that we bring to the show. And right now, one of them is Lindsay Dougherty, or it's pronounced differently in Ireland. Okay, I'm gonna let you run down the different ways you pronounce your name. I'm starting with Dougherty, right?
Dougherty is how I, as an American, would pronounce it. But if you're in Ireland, it could be Dougherty. If you want to do the Gaelic version, it could be O'Dougherty, and it could be Dougherty in Boston and Philly, for that matter. Or Dougherty if you're far in California.
Okay. Well, I'm Ed Flash Ferentz. I've heard Ferenc, I heard Ferenc, I've heard everything, but I just go by Flash. So it's Lindsay and Flash today. And let's tell you a little about Lindsay. She is a proud second-generation Teamster who comes from Detroit. She's out in Hollywood right now. West Hollywood, is that right?
My office is in North Hollywood.
North Hollywood, okay. And she began her career in the motion picture industry as a transportation dispatcher. That was over 20 years ago. And I'll tell you, you have accomplished a lot here. Looking at your bio, for the last decade, she has fought on behalf of the Teamsters, on behalf of Local 399 as a business agent, lead organizer, recording secretary, principal officer. She also holds the division director for the motion picture and theatrical trade division of the Teamsters, working in film and TV. When do you sleep?
That's one of the things I try to do is sleep so I can keep going, but it is difficult these days.
So talk to me a little bit about your family, second generation teams. Is that kind of what pushed you into this direction? Talk to me about that part first.
Yeah, 100%. Because I always say that I'm honored and privileged to be a second generation Teamster. My dad was a Teamster, still is. He's retired for about 10 years now. He started out in the late 70s as a warehouse forklift driver, and he worked his way up in the Teamsters. He was the secretary treasurer of Teamsters Local 337 in Detroit. And, so my entire life I've been under a Teamster healthcare plan because of my father. I was the first female in my family ever to go to college. That was, in 2001. After being here for many, many years, coming from Ireland and Scotland. But I was raised within a union family and knew the importance. So I was able to go to college, and right out of college, I started working as a Teamster, as you mentioned, a transportation dispatcher in the motion picture industry in Detroit, which, not many people know. There's filming that happens, not just in Hollywood, but other parts of the country and world. So that, like I said, I grew up with it. So I was around, the Labor Day parade, things like that. So labor has really been a key component of my life.
What's interesting, I've mentioned this on the show many, many times. There's so many. I think there's like 19, I might be wrong, maybe 18, 19 divisions in the Teamsters. And the one, and I'm glad we're talking about this today because we have not done anything. I've mentioned them on the show, but as far as a guest to bring onto the show and talk about the motion picture and theatrical trade division, I think that's pretty significant. Maybe you can give us a little background on that, because I think that needs a little PR in itself. What do you think?
Yeah. So, Hollywood, as, what most people know as actors, celebrities, that kind of thing. When you see a movie, you're looking at actors that you normally see. But behind the camera and the ones that actually make the movie or make a motion picture or a television series, there's a whole crew that's comprised of many trade unionists, and all have a different craft, whether it's Teamsters that we represent drivers, casting directors, location professionals, which find the locations where you film production. We also have wranglers, so animals that are filmed. Our members either are wranglers for the livestock or animal trainers for a dog specifically. And we have other members that, like mechanics, servicemen, that kind of stuff. And then the rest of the crew, you have directors, you have, costumers, makeup artists, all comprised of, again, trade unionists. So our industry is over 90% organized labor. So it's not just the actors. You have writers, additionally to what I've already mentioned. So everything happens with all of those parts and all of those people. It's not just the actors. So most people, you see what's in front of the camera, you see what's on the screen, but you don't see what it takes to make a production like that. But it's a lot of hard work from the crew.
Yeah, a lot of moving parts, no doubt about that. I was looking at some of the talking points today, and what I thought was interesting, if you could get into some details on this can't be an easy job. I understand you've been working to standardize contracts to keep the standard, the industry standard across the country. With what you just mentioned, how the heck do you standardize the contracts on that? That needs some explaining.
You learn how to be a good juggler in a circus. And that's pretty much what it is like, because you have hundreds of production companies. You have the major studios like Warner Brothers, Paramount Pictures, the studios that we've all, as regular moviegoers, have seen.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so many different production companies that are actually involved in making productions that you see on the screen. And they're traveling to all different parts of the country. They don't just film in Hollywood. They also film worldwide. So when a production company goes to, there's even filming happening in Ohio right now in Cleveland. So like if there's a movie project that goes there, we try to get a similar contract that we may have in Hollywood or that we have in Atlanta, so that everybody's, they're doing the same job.
Right.
So we're trying to standardize them. to essentially look like a national agreement, similar to what the Teamsters have in other divisions, such as UPS or, sanitation or trucking. So that's what we're trying to do, so that people aren't being undermined or undercut their wages, because any employer will take advantage of their employees whenever possible. So that's what we try to prevent from happening for our members.
Yeah, I have seen a gradual shift of movie production out of California. You know that. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. I'm looking at New York, Atlanta, New Jersey, New Mexico, Oklahoma. In fact, last year, I'm sure you know this, they filmed a good part of the Superman movie in Cleveland for all the right reasons. Number one, well, we like to have it in Cleveland for the tax dollars and all that, but Superman was born in Cleveland, on the east side, Jerry Siegel. In fact, his house is now a monument and all that. So I get that. But I'm wondering, is that part of saying, oh, California is too expensive? We got to move it into places where it's going to be easier for us to navigate through the wages and all that kind of stuff. And here you're trying to standardize those contracts. What do you say to that?
Well, I would say California, first and foremost, has always been expensive. And coming from Detroit 20 years ago is more expensive. It's California. You're paying for the weather, so to speak. But I would say with the way that the industry has worked historically is that, productions will go film somewhere for, the very reason that you mentioned. Superman's from Cleveland. They want Cleveland. They want the look, the aesthetic. They actually want to see whether it's establishing shots. Washington, D.C. is filmed all the time, but only for Washington, D.C., the buildings, the establishing shots, the exteriors, that kind of stuff. Even where I come from, Detroit, there was whoever would have thought there was filming happening in Detroit in the early 2000s, but there was. And it wasn't because of, which I'll talk about now, is tax credits, which really that's why you see more of this shift of production companies that are going to other places to film. Aside from California being expensive, they're going because of these tax incentives that the states have in various areas of the country. But this has been something that is not new to us in our industry, because we've seen this shift, I would say, global economy of our industry since the 1990s, when Canada first started offering federal, their Canadian tax incentives, which they give the production companies a tax break. And so, of course, when it comes down to money, which obviously every production company or studio has a bean counter that's saying, you know what, you can make this look like California if you go to New Mexico, or if you go here, you can, and especially if you're filming on a stage, it doesn't really matter where you're at then. But that's really what has driven productions outside of California into other states. And now we're seeing more so than ever before in other countries. There's over 100 different tax credit programs out there that all of the studios look at to film. Yeah. So that's the fight that we have in California, and have had, like I said, since the 1990s.
Yeah, I know Ohio has that program as well, and they've been amping it up too. So yeah, I'm glad we touched on that. You know what? I got to take a quick break. Lindsay Dougherty joining us on our live line today. One of many different pronunciations depending on where you live in the world. We're going to continue with her here on America's Workforce. We're going to talk about the state of the film and television industry, both nationally and globally. That and more right after this. Once again, you're listening to America's Workforce.
This is America's Workforce.
It takes LIUNA to keep America running. Over 70,000 public employees are part of LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, delivering critical services such as healthcare and emergency response, as well as maintaining roads and sanitation systems. Even the National Postal Mail Handlers Union, representing over 47,000 U.S. postal workers, is affiliated with LIUNA. Find out what it takes for LIUNA to keep America running at liuna.org. That's liuna.org.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Communication Workers of America. You can find more at cwa-union.org.
Unions are organizing all across America. New units are being formed and existing units are getting stronger. It's never been a more important or a more challenging job. Broad Stripes is here to help you do it. Broad Stripes is an all-in-one communication and organizing tool. Unions of all sizes rely on us, from nationals like LIUNA and Unite Here to locals throughout the U.S. and Canada. With Broad Stripes, you can text and email your members, create digital membership cards, identify leaders, and build the power you need to win. Check us out at broadstripes.com.
Melwood, advancing economic independence for workers with disabilities for more than 60 years. Learn more by visiting melwood.org. The Iron Workers Great Lakes District Council, consisting of 8 ironworker local unions in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Michigan. We build the skylines and bridges along the Great Lakes. With more work than ever before, the Great Lakes District Council is actively searching out the next great iron worker, whether it's building the next Intel plant or constructing a bridge to safely connect our great cities along the lake. So join the Iron Workers Great Lakes District Council today. Find out how and learn more about the council by visiting iwdistrictcouncil.com. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, where you can find more at teamster.org.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Ferens.
And remember, you can check us out on at least 5 platforms. That includes YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. And when you get an opportunity, here's what you do. Just sign up and receive our shows on a regular basis and give us a rating. We always appreciate those 5-star ratings, so please keep them coming. Featured guest today is Lindsay Dougherty. She is a proud second-generation Teamster, comes from Detroit. She's in North Hollywood right now. We're talking about a certain division of the Teamsters, and they have many. She holds the position of division director for the Motion Picture and Theatrical Trade Division, representing over 15,000 Teamsters that work in the film and television industry throughout the United States and Canada. I want to talk a little bit more about Canada and these other countries, too, because we're doing tax incentives here, but then you got other countries that are trying to outdo the incentives, and that's hurting the motion picture and TV industry. Talk to me about this contraction. I guess it started a couple of years ago. I know streaming has changed a lot of things. Why don't you explain to our audience the state of the industry right now and how you're trying to keep some stability here when it comes to jobs and wages? I know that's a very difficult task.
It is. And right now, the state of the industry is not good. I mean, we've seen in the motion picture industry throughout the last 100 years, there's been changes that have impacted workers. And those are primarily technological changes. And so in our modern day society, the big technological change we've seen is obviously the shift from how consumers view media or television or, motion pictures, which it formerly was mostly on television. And then the shift went to streaming through primarily Netflix, which started this. And that was really the shift happened when Netflix moved from DVD sales or, rentals, and then shifted to where you can actually stream on the internet. And so to speak, that's like the cord cutting that you may hear in the media. But once Netflix created House of Cards, that's what really changed this, because they started producing their own content and keeping their library on their platform, which then created this extreme competitiveness within the other studio systems. So these streamers come in, whether it's Netflix, it's Apple, Amazon now, and we have seen where now the studios had to basically change their whole way of doing business, and a lot of their business depends on advertising. And with streaming, the big sell for consumers was there's no advertising. And
Right.
then also, some will argue that it's predatory pricing, where Netflix would charge such a small amount to lure subscribers. And then, the way that success was viewed, and this is like not that long ago, we're talking like 5 years ago, success was viewed as how many subscribers you have. And Netflix obviously blew everybody out of the water. They're a global enterprise, and they have the most amount of subscribers on their platform. And so, I've been around long enough to see where the studios had to shift from being studios to then now they have their own streaming platforms. You see Universal has Peacock, Disney has Disney Plus now. Hulu is also Disney. So they had to create this entirely different business model. And so the competitive nature was, let's get as much content on our platforms to get the most amount of subscribers, and let's spend all the money in the world that we don't have. And then when Wall Street got a hold of that, well, there was a dip in Netflix's subscriber numbers. And now success really isn't based on your subscriber number. It's based on revenue and sales and profits. So the big shift has been now the contraction is really the streaming bubble has popped. There's still obviously competition between all of these companies, but they're not spending as much money. And during this time, the contraction began before the writer's strike and then the SAG-AFTRA strike, which then now has put us into the worst point of the contraction, where the companies, not only are they not spending as much money, but now they're seeing where can we get the most bang for our buck. And that's where the tax credit or the tax incentives come into play, because the driving force is money, which has always been in our industry. And so really that's where we're seeing the more work shift to other countries because of these tax incentives during a time in which there's contraction, which is why the levels of production right now are at its lowest.
Now, you mentioned the UK. Are there other countries on that list where you're seeing, this motion picture production going?
Yeah, I mean, dozens upon dozens. You have like Romania, you have obviously Canada, there's Australia, there's New Zealand. I mean, Malta, Spain, Italy, France, you name it. They all have it. And because they see the value of it, because it not only brings money to their economy, but also like you see a project like Game of Thrones, people go to visit where they filmed Game of Thrones in Spain and Ireland now.
Yeah.
We're at a point now where it's not just for the aesthetics. They're going to Ireland to film American game shows with American actors, where you think that the game show is filmed somewhere in California and it's actually been filmed in Dublin, Ireland.
Now, I have to ask you this. The climate right now in Washington, it's, bring those jobs back. And, what's happening here is just the opposite. And you know as well as I mean, we have seen so many good paying jobs in this country. NAFTA, PNTR, gone. I mean, they're gone. They're not coming back. They're trying to bring some back with these chip plants and all that. But we're seeing the same thing happen here. Now, my question to you, is there any kind of movement legislatively to say, stop this madness right now?
Absolutely. I mean, like I mentioned on the state level, there obviously has been this fight that we've had in California for decades now, because our program does have to be modernized and changed. But the other discussion that we're also having on the federal side is federal legislation that brings a federal incentive into fruition, because that's what we really need, because these state tax credits they're not meant to compete with the UK. They're not meant to compete with these other countries. So we are actually, the International Brotherhood of Teamsters right now is working with the Trump administration on how we can get this done as soon as possible, because when you talk about bringing jobs back, it's a very easy fix in our industry specifically. We don't have to build manufacturing plants. We already have the workforce, and we already have the infrastructure everywhere in the United States, most certainly in Los Angeles, which, has always been known as the film entertainment capital of the world. But we have, right now we have empty stages. And that can be said nationally. So we have an opportunity to really do this right now, which is what we're actively working on right now as well.
Now, I know you work with a lot of unions, the Writers Guild, my union, SAG-AFTRA. I see LIUNA. LIUNA is our presenting a sponsor here on the show. Are we all in this together on this fight? Are we have a lot of solidarity right now? I would imagine so, because we're talking about everybody's job at risk.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, because, especially like post writers and actors strike, like the unions really came together during that time. And so we have stuck together, as sometimes it's painful because we all have difference of opinions all the time, but we have been doing this, working collaboratively with the coalition. And we're doing that on the federal side as well. I will say, some of the unions aren't set up nationally like we are. So we're definitely utilizing the Teamster power that we have to get this done.
I see you're working with John Voight on this. Can you tell me about that and how we were able to get that together? And celebrity helps. You know that. Yeah, I mean, SAG-AFTRA definitely has their star power, but he not only has, obviously, he's John Voight, but he has a relationship with President Trump, which is why he was tapped as being one of the special ambassadors to Hollywood. But he cares deeply about this industry and wants to see it grow and be what it once was. And I think especially him being, in California and seeing what's happened here, specifically in Los Angeles, it's very jarring to see how Hollywood once was and what it is now. And for me, being from Detroit, seeing what happens with the auto industry there, like we're looking at the same thing here. Right. That's what we're trying to really fight this. And so with Mr. Voight, he has had, he met with President Trump less than a month ago to talk about the plan, the Hollywood initiative, and really not just Hollywood, California, but to bring jobs back to the United States for American workers. So he's very much in the fight, and he has his whole team that we talk to them pretty consistently still to try and see this through. Did he offer any comments on that meeting? Is there a next step planned here? Just wondering. I mean, you're meeting with the president. That could be very dynamic. You know that. Yes. No. I mean, so right now there is an opportunity to possibly get federal legislation through the reconciliation bill that you hear about all the time. And so that's the goal, to get a federal legislation immediately, because it is very much past due, I will say. And we're doing that on the state side as well. So we've been talking to Mr. Voight about that still. And then obviously, there's other things that we can make tweaks to not just get funding for this legislation, but also, because really it's tax, it's a tax rebate, but also to modernize our programs to make it extremely competitive, if not even more competitive, because the longer that we wait and the more time that we allow for these other countries to build infrastructure and a workforce, the more in trouble we're going to be. We need to really just nip it in the bud. It's already gone it's gone too far already. And so really that's why it's a very urgent matter for our industry right now to get this done. So we're actively working with them. I mean, we have meetings daily about this to try and get it done. Well, I'll keep an eye on the Teamster website. And, Lindsay, that's what this show's all about. I mean, I can't tell you how many times people come to the table to educate our listeners on these issues because they don't know about them. Media is so convoluted today, that, and it's so fragmented. So it's important. This show is all about the working class. It's all about unions. We're talking about protecting union jobs. That's what it's all about. You know that. You grew up in a union family. We want to make sure that those jobs stay here. Well, I'm going to leave it on that note. You take care. Please stay in touch with us. Teamsters are sponsors here on America's Workforce. We appreciate what Teamsters do in so many different ways, all the different divisions. And I'm glad we finally featured this one division. So thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you, Flash. I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to check in with the National Labor Office of Blue Cross and Blue Shield.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
It takes LiUNA to power North America with affordable energy. The men and women of LiUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, have the skills needed to build and maintain oil, natural gas, nuclear, solar, and wind projects that are shaping America's energy future. From new energy tech to retrofitted facilities, LiUNA members do it all. Find out what it takes to be powered by LiUNA at liuna.org. That's liuna.org.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the United Steelworkers. You can find more at usw.org. Melwood is a dynamic nonprofit organization providing jobs and great opportunities for people with disabilities. And they do this through strategic partnerships with the federal government, unions, and community partners. Melwood is all about advancing economic independence for workers with disabilities, and they've been doing this for more than 60 years in Washington, D.C. and the surrounding area. Learn more about Melwood by visiting their website, melwood.org.
America's Workforce appreciates our sponsor, the Columbus Central Ohio Building and Construction Trades Council, who represents more than 18,000 workers from 19 affiliated local unions and district councils.
This segment of the show is brought to you by the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. For more information, please visit bmwe.org. America's Workforce is presented by the Labor's International Union of North America. Feel the power right now at liuna.org.
Now, back to Ed Flash Ferens with America's Workforce.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm joined again today by Merrilee Logue. And for those who don't know, you should know by now. She's been on the show a number of times. But anyway, Merrilee is the executive director of the National Labor Office at Blue Cross Blue Shield Association, where she oversees the National Labor Office. Merrilee, welcome back to America's Workforce.
Thanks, Flash. And before we get started, I want to thank you and your team for giving us a platform to discuss health topics that are top of mind for American workers and their families. Given it's Mental Health Awareness Month, I want to discuss the mental health crisis our nation is facing and what we at Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies are doing to address this.
Yes, it is very important. And we've been doing a lot here on the show to call attention to this subject because it is an important topic. And I see you brought a guest with you today. Let's talk about her.
Yes, with me today is Dr. Ruthie Fesahazion-Fortune, who has such a great background in health policy, including health disparities.
Okay, Ruthie, well, welcome to the show. And why don't you first start off by telling us a bit about yourself and how you got into this line of work? Go ahead.
Hi, Flash. I'm Ruthie Fesahazion-Fortune, a public health leader devoting my career to working in the community health, health policy, and health insurance spaces. Before this, I was a researcher and focused on the impact of economic recessions on health disparities. And I've spent the last 12 years working with the Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies on patient-centered care, affordability, and improving clinical operations. I joined the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association last year as the project director for clinical affairs, and I'm very proud to come from my millennial generation that has done a great job moving the mental health conversation into the open and has helped me understand my own anxieties and when they move into unhealthy spaces. I have personally benefited from the diversity of resources available, so I am very honored to be part of this conversation today.
As am I. What an amazing background. Let's start the conversation by discussing what mental health is. Merrilee, I'm going to start with you.
So mental health encompasses our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act, influencing our ability to handle stress, relate to others, and make decisions. Nationwide, a growing number of people are recognized as having mental health conditions. In fact, 1 in 5 adults, more than 50 million people, are currently experiencing a mental health condition. And to make matters more challenging, many of those individuals lack access to treatment they may need. And specifically for labor groups, maintaining a good mental health is crucial for not only productivity, but job safety and overall quality of life.
So, Merrilee, what are the common mental health challenges that primarily labor groups face today? Can you answer that for us?
Sure. Well, Flash, one of the main challenges union members face is stress from the high-pressure environments and tight deadlines. Anxiety related to job security and financial stability is also a big challenge in labor, especially for those union members with seasonal or erratic schedules. Depression from long hours and lack of work-life balance, as well as burnout from physical and emotional exhaustion, are other challenges.
Okay, for our listeners, why don't we tell them the difference with those mental health challenges?
So stress is the body's physical, emotional, mental reaction to a perceived threat or demand, while anxiety is a feeling of worry, nervousness, or uneasiness, typically about an imminent event or something that, may be uncertain with the outcome. Depression is a mood disorder characterized by a persistent feeling, that feeling of sadness and loss of interest and pleasure in activities that were maybe once enjoyable.
Okay, Merrilee, thank you for that. Now, Ruthie, I want to turn it over to you from a clinical perspective. What are you seeing in the workplace?
Well, Flash, employees don't leave a common cold at home to come into the workplace. It's the same for mental health conditions. Our employees are coming into work dealing with real mental health challenges that are impacting their productivity, absenteeism, and burnout. So it's important for employers and workplaces to be spaces that promote a culture of health.
Now, I know mental health stigma is also a huge problem, given that it can lead to feelings of low self-esteem, isolation, things like that. What can you tell our listeners about mental health stigma?
So, Flash, mental health stigma refers to negative attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors directed towards individuals with mental health conditions. Combating stigma in any workplace is extremely difficult. As you mentioned, many people can feel low self-esteem and isolation, which will prevent them from seeking treatment for mental health conditions. In fact, 8 in 10 workers say they feel shame about the state of their mental health.
Wow. I didn't realize that. 8 in 10, that's 80%. So let's keep going with this. Is it true that more than half of young professionals reported needing help for emotional or mental health problems this past year?
That is true. And almost a third of young professionals say that their environment in their workplaces have negatively impacted their mental health and well-being.
Another question here. What does it cost to provide mental health coverage?
Total medical costs for a member per year for just the physical conditions on its own is about $4,000. But that number jumps closer to $6,000 for those people suffering with a mental health condition. But the bigger problem, Flash, is that over 70% of the employers believe that offering additional mental health benefits is just too costly, which in my opinion suggests that many leaders just don't understand the exponential benefit of maintaining a fully supported and mentally strong workforce. And we need to do everything we do collectively as a nation to get rid of the mental health stigma.
Now, Merrilee, let's stick with you. Do you see this within the labor sector?
I do. And even with the mental health parity laws, I still see an issue. And quite honestly, the answer is complex.
All right, let's go back to Ruthie. Ruthie, how can people identify or recognize any signs or symptoms that someone could be struggling with their mental health?
Yeah, great question, Flash. So before getting into signs and symptoms, I think it would be good for our listeners to first know that symptoms can vary based on the person and what they're struggling with. So, for example, someone struggling with stress and anxiety could have symptoms of difficulty concentrating, increased irritability, changes in sleep patterns, headaches, stomach aches, those types of things. But someone with depression could have symptoms that include persistent sadness or a low mood, a loss of interest in activities, fatigue, a lack of energy, and feelings of worthlessness or guilt. So understanding and knowing the symptoms is something I feel everyone should be aware of and be able to recognize. And I also highly recommend people to talk to their doctors if they're starting to feel like they're experiencing any symptoms.
I agree, Ruthie. I also think it's extremely important that employers and labor organizations work together to create a supportive workplace environment and build a culture of support. The workplace plays such a critical role in supporting the mental health of their employees. So just by implementing initiatives such as mental health trainings or workshops, creating open dialogue about mental health, encouraging work-life balance, and recognizing the symptoms could make a huge difference in someone's life.
Now, Merrilee, you mentioned at the beginning of this podcast that you wanted to discuss what Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies are doing to address this. So what can you tell us about what's happening?
Well, Flash, I'm going to actually turn that over to our expert, Ruthie.
Of course, happy to, Merrilee. Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies are committed to addressing mental health challenges. And our commitment to addressing mental health challenges is built around three main pillars. First, we are improving access to quality and affordable care. Second, we are reducing stigma by creating a culture of health. And third, we are addressing youth mental health. So we're working to broaden our approach to care by increasing access to more affordable options. Between 2019 and 2023, Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies grew their network of behavioral health providers by 55%. That's more than 450,000 providers across all 50 states, with a particularly strong growth in specialty areas like addiction counselors or psychiatric registered nurses. In addition, 100% of Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies offer virtual behavioral health programs. Since mental health is such an important part of people's lives, Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies are consistently looking for ways to provide access and resources to anyone who may need them, for themselves or for a loved one.
Boy, it's a lot, and this has been such an informative conversation. I want to thank Merrilee and Ruthie for joining me today for another great conversation. Any last words here, Merrilee? What do you think?
Thanks again for having us, Flash. We at Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies are dedicated to supporting American workers so they can live their healthiest life, because we know healthy members mean strong unions. As for me and my team, we sponsor labor events, conferences, and conventions throughout the year. You can follow us at Blue Labor on LinkedIn and on X, formerly Twitter.
Well, Merrilee, a big thank you to you and our guest from Blue Cross Blue Shield Association, Merrilee, sharing her experience with Ruthie here. And again, you could follow Merrilee at Blue Labor on LinkedIn and X, formerly known as Twitter. And that'll be it for yet another edition of America's Workforce. Coming up on Monday, the latest from the Valley Labor Report and the Teamsters fighting for good jobs in solid waste and recycling. Until then, all of you have a safe and wonderful weekend.
That concludes another episode of the America's Workforce Radio Podcast. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. America's Workforce is a production of Labor Tools and BMA Media Group. Find out more information online at labortools.com.